I Head of Solutions at Amazon Web Services, or AWS as his friends call him. James Woodward is the CEO Australia and New Zealand of Bulk Group. Katarina Okuto is the Head of Policy and Insights at AusNet, and the fabulous Hannah Glass, Special Counsel at Ashurst, who described herself as me in CDR. So massive compliment. Guys, get your asses up here. We've got a panel. And they're pumped. They want to hear what you have to say. Don't waste another second. Share this enormous wisdom. Enjoy.
Okay, well, the first 30 seconds of my speech has been stolen, thank you. But yes, our topic today is Agentic AI. I like to think of Agentic AI as sort of goal-directed AI with the ability to sort of, sense, decide, and act in the pursuit of a particular outcome. So the way we're going to spend the next 25 to 30 minutes is talking about the good parts of AI, the bad parts of AI, what can go wrong, and then we're going to delve into the future of AI. So we're going to start with Ben. I thought we'd start with a question. Where do you see AI doing a better job than a human?
Okay. I'll probably draw on some examples and sort of ground it in reality rather than where I thought they'd be used. Because I've even been surprised someone building AI or innovative products for 25 years. You have a view of what it's going to have impact with. So I've probably spent the last year doing fin crime, transaction monitoring, mortgages, business lending, frauds and scams. So 5, 6 big solutions, and the ones it's best at, which is the surprise for me, was the things which involved human emotions. Like, why would AI be better at dealing with human emotions in that sort of context when you think it should just do the kind of the complex technical stuff and leave the emotional stuff to the humans? It's actually because when a customer is in a highly emotional state, we'll pick one of those use cases like, say you've been defrauded, and you call up and you're in an absolute state of fear. It's not like you've just lost $50. It's like I've lost 50, and it's like the next thing is my whole bank account's going to be emptied, and that's got $20,000 in it. So the level of fear is immense, and they're not thinking rationally either. And the person who answers the call is also not emotionally kind of armoured to deal with that level of stress, and every call is different. And so after a few calls, or maybe after a day of this, if you're on the front line, you're cooked. And so when we started to build these agents in these situations, it would be a thing that could, use good things like reflect. I hear you. I understand. This is what I think you're saying. Can you clarify? And just sort of like tone it all down. And then once the basics are sorted and things are settled, then pass it on to a human. So these are still AI, humans in the loop. Nothing's going full AI all the way through. But that sort of emotional context and being able to sort of like relate to their situation, get some key bits of information, then bring the human in, can allow these things to scale, have big impact, help customers. And that seems to be applying. It's starting to play out in business lending. Imagine you're doing a business loan. I know probably most of you are CEOs and owners. Imagine you've worked on your startup for like 4 years and you're going for some big round of funding, and you're also trying to buy your home, and you've got kids in private school, and your whole livelihood depends on you getting that business loan. And you work on it for 3 months, and you've got to do payroll. And then the bank, after 3 months of review of your business loan, the average time is 60 days, but some go to 3-4 months. And then on the 60th day, they come back and say no. Like, the stress that they're now in trying to get another business loan applies again, but probably the stakes are even higher. So these situations that people find themselves in are actually pretty intense. And so, how do we get AI to help in those meaningful moments?
And are some of those solutions, with institutions live? Are people using it right now?
So they are in live testing. So it's very select cohorts to make sure that they're being responsible, to make sure that there's no... basically, most of the work is designing for the unexpected. So you design... The basis of the whole solution is built. It used to take 3 months. Then it took 3 weeks. And the last 2 solutions, like the last 2 weeks, I haven't had much sleep, were built in about 2 or 3 days. So you built the basic product in 2 or 3 days. Then the next 3 to 6 months are hard hardening it for all of the stuff that people are going to do that you didn't think of. And so that's where all those products are now.
And Katarina, focusing a lot of this audience is focused on the payments industry. What do you see as some of the opportunities, for the room in this space?
I think focusing on payments, there's still a huge amount of opportunities. I mean, Ben's already mentioned quite a few of them: dispute management, fraud prevention, and response. That there is even operational resilience, right? I think a lot of payment processors could really benefit from agentic solutions, but I know that today's conversation we're focusing on client-facing solutions. So I think within that context, where we're seeing a lot of industry attention and focus on at the moment is building out what they're calling Agentic Commerce, right? So this is the idea where a customer can direct an AI agent to go and make purchases or transactions on their behalf, right? So last month, preparing for Intersekt, I went to Perplexity, asked it for a list of recommendations for hotels, within 5-minute walking distance and meeting the very long list of criteria that I have for hotels, right? It comes back to me with recommendations, but once I choose it, I still have to go to the hotel website and manually make the booking, make the payment myself, right? When I'm coming to Intersekt next year, I'm expecting to look at that list of options and tell Perplexity or whoever my AI agent of choice is to go and book option 2 for me, right? And that agent is going to go and complete the booking form. It's going to make the payment using the credit card that's going to give me the most points for that particular booking. It's going to find the website with the best deal, right? So depending on the level of agency that we give these agents, with our payment credentials, with our purchasing decisions, you can really imagine a world where the checkout process disappears completely. And if I think about the opportunities for this room, they're endless, really. I don't think the role of fintechs changes when it comes to that, right? You're thinking about what are the needs of the customers that you're trying to serve, and then you're going to build really good customer experiences and technology to meet those needs, right? You have the likes of Visa, MasterCard, PayPal. They've all announced that they're building out Agentic Commerce solutions, but what they're building the rails, they're building the infrastructure and the frameworks that will allow agents to use their payment rails to make that payment, right? Fintechs are going to innovate on top of those rails, right? You're going to design the customer experiences because Agentic Commerce isn't just about hiding the checkout. It's about how do we make payments better for customers, right? Can we help them make the decision about which payment method to use? Can we maybe help them make decisions about purchases and the timing of purchases based on their cash flows that they're going to have coming up over the next few weeks? Maybe we can turn everything into a Duolingo for financial literacy, right? The opportunities are really endless, so I'm really excited to see what this room comes up with over the next little while.
Excellent, thank you. I want to pivot now to what can go wrong, because often we sit here and we talk about the good things about AI and how it's going to help and aid processes and create better customer experience. But perhaps Hannah, we can start talking about where bad AI can come in.
I love the fact that as soon as we go from good to bad, the first person you turn to is the lawyer. Clearly, lawyers are obviously hard ingrained to work out now where is this going to be exploited. And I think your point was really accurate, which is as we're building, it's not the actual creation of the solution that's taking time now. It's actually ensuring that it will do what it is intended to do, and that it will do what it is intended to do in the broad array of circumstances in which it could possibly be used. And that's actually quite a different way of thinking about it. It's kind of why we say, anyone in this room will start with a POC. You start there because you want to work out, well, does the solution work? And then you go, well, actually, is it battle hardy? Is it tested? I think when we're looking at the world of AI and agentic commerce, we need to always remember that this is a tool. And so when we are using it, it needs to be used in the same way that we think of, or it needs to be thought of in the same way that we think of other tools themselves. And Kat, you've been speaking about what happens with when we're using sort of fintechs who are actually providing those agentic solutions. Well, that's exactly right. It's the fintech. It's not that's providing the solution. And so from a when things go wrong perspective, when we're using AI, it's about making sure that the solution is built in a way that is robust, that is resilient, that is battle hardy, and also is appropriate for the use case. And so if you're thinking about it in the context of payments or taking it one step further and looking at, say, banking, it's fundamentally important that people recognize that, well, this is another piece of technology that is being implemented in that particular area. And there is a whole raft of legal obligations that will already apply. And so, in particular, there's the obligations in relation to outsourcing. That's not an AI framework. That is a banking framework in CPS 230. And so there are all sorts of ways that AI can be, that we think of using AI, but ultimately we have a framework for it. If I turn back to, how are people using it in the wrong way? Well, I think we've already spoken about scams and fraud. The interesting thing is it's being used to perpetuate the bad, but it is also being used to combat that bad too. So we're seeing it kind of on both sides of the ledger, I think.
Can I just ask, I hadn't realised that the 230 applied to this, so the outsourcing rules that are applying to banking, do you mean that like if you would have agents doing certain tasks and roles, that would actually fall under the regulations and you could actually have to put extra controls around it and things under that 230, CS 230?
So what you're actually getting at there is kind of where, and I know we're going to come to this at some stage later, so I apologise, but how do we apply legal frameworks in the context of AI? In Australia, we have a framework which is intended to be technology neutral and principles based. And that means that when we say technology neutral, we do intend to apply that regardless of the technology. And so if the starting point is what is there in existence, and then applying that as it is required. Now, when you're going through those requirements, you need to actually take a step back. It then also goes to the concept of what is an agent? And what do we mean when we're talking about agents? I don't know if we want to get into that whole legal discussion yet.
I haven't even read the standards. I'm thinking I should go read. We'll get my AI to summarise them.
And do these standards apply? We're talking a little bit about Australia, but what is there an international standard? How does that work?
So there is work being undertaken at the ISO level in relation to creation of international standards for AI. What's really interesting is we have different frameworks being developed in different places around the world. So in Europe, there are laws specifically targeting AI. Now, it makes sense in that context. They don't have a principles-based framework. They don't have a common law-based framework. And as a result, sometimes it's necessary to have specific laws in place because existing ones can't apply within that paradigm. You have the US, where it's much more business-driven. And if you look at what's happening within the ISO discussions, you do have a tussle between, well, what does this mean when we get into the more technical aspect of it when you're trying to apply those international standards? Australia sits a little bit in the middle, and if anyone's is familiar with what's been happening with the Productivity Commission, they have come out and said the purpose is actually now to work out how our existing framework applies, to identify the gaps and then plug those gaps. Again, that's what we do across our entire system. If you look at the other areas of reform that we've undertaken, it's the same process, and it should be no different.
Excellent. We might pivot now. I wanted to sort of explore what the future might look like, because we're very much at the start of this journey, and someone could say this is the worst AI that we'll ever experience. So Ben, obviously at AWS, you've got some global perspective. I know you've been in the States, in the last few weeks. In 5 years' time, and I know it's a big topic, where do you see the industry, and particularly, where do you see AI first and then human second?
Okay. Well, first of all, you must have used AI to update to go to 5 years. That's a long time. I have sorry if there's any futurists in the room. I have like an allergic reaction to that title because it is impossible to predict where technology is going to go to any large degree accurately. And 5 years at the speed that things are going is like beyond my horizon. But there's trends and things, and there's signals in the market that you can see. So from my single point of view inside AWS financial services, so all banks, all insurers, capital markets, payment providers, and anyone large. I'm just do enterprise, so it's about sort of 600 customers. I'm sitting there sort of going, who's doing agentic? Like I just do agentic solutions. Banking, all of them. So banking, top to bottom, onboarding of customers, processing customers, servicing customers, cost out, reimagining front-end experiences, north, south, east, but everything. Banks are done. Well, not done, they're in deep in it, and that'll change first. Insurance, don't worry about them. Maybe they're 5 years. I've tried. So if anyone's insurance, it's a weird space. The customer is risk, and it's a totally different model. So they will come, but probably more in the 5 years. I personally think payments is next. Like next year is going to be wild. If you're having the year I had next year, like you won't get any sleep. So, and it goes really fast. Like what happens in a year is basically your whole industry is like flip the table, everything starts again. Hot tip, find the risk team. They're the best prompt engineers. So dealing for risk. So if you don't have a risk person in your company, get one. And then the way that they think of all the things that you didn't think of. And so they write great prompts. So get your risk person and then flip the table and redo everything from the ground up. Payments will go, and then I think it'll move into capital markets. Wealth, I've pitched it to every CEO, every major organisation. I won't name them all, but it's pretty funny. They all say, Ben, you're crazy. We will not do financial advice because there's some rules or there's things that happened and they all still remember it. I don't know. I didn't work in financial services a few years ago, but they seem to be slightly scarred. When wealth goes, that's wild. Like you imagine payments meets wealth meets commerce. Like wealth is the big one. That's kind of like the $1 trillion industry. So I think that'll go after payments. So it'll be wealth, and then that'll move into capital markets, and then insurance will go last.
And from an Australian perspective, is the adoption rate high here versus other countries and in terms of AWS?
I'd say we're on par or leading the world, not just like America. And so the examples would be like in America, it's Rocket Mortgages. Rocket Mortgages, we do connects with them regularly. Agentic, top to bottom, every mortgage is issued by agents, like tens of agents. And then they're working with our local customers because they're not competing. So, one of the major banks here is like, we want to be like Rocket. And then in the other space, it's like frauds or business banking, they talk to us. So and then the problem is the talent, because people build this stuff and then they go to America. So that's a different story.
And Katarina, when we look forward, how do you think the relationship looks between, the consumer and the financial system and the infrastructure in Australia?
Definitely not putting timelines on this one. Look, I think we're going to see a bit of a paradox in terms of how the customer relationship changes with financial services, because if you sort of take what I talked about with Agentic Commerce and extend it to Agentic Finance, right? Think about having AI agents that can help you not just make payments, but monitor your bank accounts and move money around to maximize your interest income. Or maybe an agent that can help you plan out your investment strategy and actually build that portfolio for you. Or maybe an agent that can actually go negotiate on behalf of you with different banks for a better mortgage rate and then automatically refinance you, right? So you can imagine a world where everybody could have access to a personal CFO in their pocket, right? So the role of the customer becomes to set the financial goals and the financial outcomes that they want to achieve, and then the actual manual administrative tasks are going to be carried out by their AI agents. And I think what happens in terms of the customer relationship with financial services, you kind of have, on the one hand, customers are going to be much more engaged in financial services. They're going to have access to a lot more financial services and products that they may not have accessed before because of the various barriers that they face, right? But agents break down those barriers. So we're going to see a lot more inclusion, a lot more involvement, and a lot more access to different products and services. But on the other hand, you're accessing those products one step removed, right? So even though you're accessing more financial products and services, you're not directly engaging with the providers of those services, because it's going to be your agent that's going to have those day-to-day interactions. And I do think that changes things a bit for the financial services industry, because some of the things that some institutions used to rely on, things like attention and customer loyalty, they fall out the window because agents don't have brand preferences, right? Agents don't have time constraints or knowledge constraints, right? They have perfect financial literacy if you build them that way, right? So it becomes, the focus, the competition becomes primarily focused on making sure that you're consistently meeting the needs of customers and that you're delivering that customer value and the customer outcomes. And to be honest, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing.
Awesome. We've got a couple of minutes just before we head for questions, but one topic that I did want to delve into with the group is a discussion around responsibility and responsibility for the AI. You know, it's been given a brief, right? It's told, you know, more or less what to do, but how do we manage that responsibility? And I'll start with you, please, Hannah.
I think the responsibility comes down to who is doing what. Now, Kat, your example around increasing financial inclusion using agents is a really interesting one, because you think about it and you say, well, you have instructed a program that is provided to you by a third party to then assess and make decisions and then potentially enter into transactions which relate to financial products and services that are made available by regulated institutions. Now, if it is truly an agent, then you have instructed someone to go and assist you in relation to making decisions around financial products and services. Now, we have a framework for that. That's called financial product advice. And entering into financial services on your behalf, you might need an AFSL for that, if you're talking about it from a legal perspective. What that means then is we're talking about who is actually an agent and what does it mean? Because when we're talking about it now, an agent acts on behalf of the principal. So the action of the agent is imputed back. But agents can have obligations too, like to have a financial services license, like to comply with the conditions of those licenses. So if you're the person who's building the agent or making the agent available, then the question is, are you just providing a dumb piece of software, in which case you're not actually an agent, or are you actually acting as an agent, in which case you might need to comply with the framework that is made available to you? And so in making these products and services available, we might need to look through the term agent and actually consider, are you genuinely acting in that capacity or not?
Excellent. Now, we've got about 4 minutes.
I just wanted to funny build on this. I didn't have this story yesterday. Before I came here, I was with a company that does trading. Spent 2 hours, and they were talking about a roadmap to develop a platform to help them agents trade. And you can build it now, and the best way to get around the regulations is to open source it. So instead of talking about the roadmap, hypothetically, I want to see if this is possible, because we'll continue the project. Why don't we just write it with them and then just put it on GitHub? Because if the agent is on GitHub and it does all the things like trading and executes trades and does all the things you need to manage your portfolio, if no one owns it, how does the regulation kick in? Like, who gets busted? Do I get busted?
I think you're in a minefield here, Ben.
I'm very happy to provide you with a detailed advice on that if you would like.
You're my agent, can read the detailed advice. Yeah.
And I understand there are friends of ours from ASIC in the room here too.
And maybe Hannah, just give the 25-second answer, because we do want to leave the last 3 minutes for a few questions.
Sure thing. I think when you say, well, the agent ate my homework, that may not quite be good enough. Just saying, well, it's on GitHub and it's open source, therefore it doesn't matter. Someone put it up there. Someone made it available. And someone put the thought into what that actually is and how it might work in practice. The question then is, are you taking that directly and implementing it? Or are you then taking it, considering it, and transforming it? You might find that depending on what you're doing, different people might be responsible. But the concept of, I've put something up and it's open source and anyone can access it and therefore I'm absolved of all responsibility, may not necessarily be the right outcome. But again, it depends on what you've put up there.
All right, we're gonna go to questions. We're trying to get more billable hours here. Perhaps we can have some questions in the room, please. Thank you.
Thank you. This is hilarious and entertaining. I've got a question bouncing a little bit between Hannah and Ben, if that's all right. And it comes back to that responsibility and accountability of what you put out there. And Ben, you mentioned your chief risk officer is the best person to go and find out what goes wrong. So the question's really around what's the worst thing that can go wrong? There's plenty of bad actors in the world. I personally have trouble thinking like those folks. We're supposed to defend against them, but without responsibility, you know, I'm operating my little crime ring. It's a fantastic tool. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about the dark side.
I mean, it's not hard to imagine the worst thing that can go wrong in this industry would be that a bad actor would not build it himself or herself. The bad actor would build a system that built a self-improving system, and that system was also set up in a way that it learnt based on the thing, and once you let this thing loose, and you could build it today, and sure, the first few agents wouldn't get your bank account, but on a feedback loop with real-time prompt engineering that actually updates the prompts, the same way fintechs build prompt engineering, feedback loops, meta prompting, that you could build an army of agents that self-improve, and the ones that work get better, and it would clean out people's bank accounts. Like, it would get there eventually. The question would be, is the return on investment worth it? The compute might cost more than the return. So, yeah.
Any more questions?
Got time for a couple of jokes.
Any comments from Ben in terms of, you know, what can go wrong, Hannah? You know, the bad actors, the armies of agents who are plotting against, you know, against the banks.
Look, I think there are always going to be bad actors out there. I think we already have seen, particularly with the introduction of things like the scams prevention framework, that there are different vectors at which bad actors can attack, whether it is, you know, directly at the actual bank account, whether it's the human that is making the decisions, whether it's actually the funds that are in transit. As Kat was saying, currently, a lot of the time, it's the humans that are being attacked, not the technology. Now, we might see that the bad actors start looking at the technology and how they can actually access that, if that becomes the single point of the point of least friction and the point of least resistance in the system. So I think what people need to be aware of is which is the easiest point to attack, and then making sure that that is appropriately strengthened. And so saying, again, we're using a piece of software, it's applying those same principles when you're doing that. I think we're also seeing some interesting areas, particularly where people are using the software to attack the attackers. So when we've got, there's a piece of software out there that's being deployed by some of the banks where they are identifying scam calls, and they are then actually have an AI-based solution that is then taking up the time of those scammers on the calls. And that means that the scammers' resources are now diverted away from speaking to real people to speaking to the scammers, to speaking to the AI.
Awesome.
Can I add to that one? It's a Sydney company, APRA AI, spun out of Macquarie University for a couple of professors. I had a chat with them. My favourite part of this story is because they do real Australian voices and characters in various shapes and sizes. Once the AI realised that they had longer engagement when they started swearing, all the AI started learning to swear and then swears at the scammers. The scammers love it, they seem genuine, and again, they extended the engagement. It's hilarious. Fun at work. Fucking genius.
Which, on a positive note, like, do have fun with this. I think the way you keep out of the dark stuff there, like, I don't normally think of the worst. The way that makes this fun is, like, how can you have fun with this? Like, 10-year-old kid, the stuff that's the prompt engineering my 10-year-old comes up with is wild. He knows where all the edges are, well, not all of them, but he's found some crazy edges in these things. And so find different people who have different perspectives or from different cultures, do some stuff with First Nations, work with them on prompts. Like, it's just the way that people think about the world, you can take it in totally different directions. So yeah, have fun.
Get off.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Put your hand.